Here at daminteresting.com is an article written by Alan Bellows entitled The Phantom Time Hypothesis. Mr. Bellows begins, when Dr. Hans Ulrich Niemitz introduces his paper on the phantom time hypothesis, he kindly asks his readers to be patient, benevolent, and open to radically new ideas, because his claims are highly unconventional. This is because his paper is suggesting three difficult-to-believe propositions. Number one, hundreds of years ago, our calendar was polluted with 297 years which never occurred. This is not the year 2005, but rather 1708. Or, let's see, add 3 and 26. I can't do it in my head. For this year, but add what to that? 523. Add 18 to that, add 18 to that. So this year would be 1726. And 3, the purveyors of this hypothesis are not crackpots. The phantom time hypothesis suggests that the early Middle Ages never happened, but were added to the calendar long ago, either by accident, by misinterpretation of documents, or by deliberate falsification by calendar conspirators. This would mean that all artifacts ascribed to those 3 centuries belong to other periods, and that all events thought to have occurred during the same period occurred at other times, or they are outright fabrications. For instance, a man named Heribert Illig, pictured, one of the leading proponents of the theory, believes that Charlemagne was a fictional character. But upon what evidence is this theory based? It seems that historians are plagued by a plethora of falsified documents from the Middle Ages. And such was the subject of an archaeological conference in Munich, Germany in 1986. The Germans say München. In his lecture there, Horst Fuhrmann, president of the Monumenta Germani Historica, Germania, described how some documents forged by the Roman Catholic Church during the Middle Ages were created hundreds of years before their great moments arrived, after which they were embraced by medieval society. This implies that whoever produced the forgeries must have very skillfully anticipated the future, or there was some discrepancy in calculating the dates. This was reportedly the first bit of evidence that roused Illig's curiosity. He wondered why the church would have forged documents hundreds of years before they would become useful. So he and his group examined other fakes from preceding centuries, and they divined chronological distortions. This led them to investigate the origin of the Gregorian calendar, which raised even more inconsistencies. In 1582, the Gregorian calendar we still use today was introduced by Pope Gregory XIII to replace the outdated Julian calendar. Which had been implemented in 45 years before Christ. The Gregorian calendar was designed to correct for a 10-day discrepancy caused by the fact that the Julian years was almost 11 minutes too long. But by Heribert Illich's math, the 1,627 years which had passed since the Julian calendar started should have accrued a 13-day discrepancy. A 10-day error would have only taken 1,257 years. So Illig and his group went hunting for other gaps in history, and found a few. For example, a gap of building in Constantinople between 558 AD and 908 AD, and a gap in the doctrine of faith, especially the gap in the evolution of theory and meaning of purgatory. 600 AD until 1100 AD. From this data, they have become convinced that at some time the calendar year was increased by 297 years, without a corresponding passage of time. Sometimes a hypothesis which challenges convention can be alluring, particularly when it could plausibly fit most of the facts. But the evidence presented by Iliad and his group, mostly written in German, seems circumstantial. Their hypothesis does raise some interesting questions and point out some inconsistencies in history. But to jump to that conclusion indicates an unscientific approach to the problem. Their suggestion for the possible motives behind this calendar conspiracy are also not found substantiated by present-day science. For instance, the first hypothesis they put forward is that Otto III modified the calendar so that his reign would include the year 1000 AD, because this would put him in God's good graces, according to his understanding of Christian millennialism. So although history and future are both strange places, neither seems to be quite as strange as the phantom history. Looks like we're going to comments. Here we have to be very careful. Hopefully most of these are just about history. Just Another Name says, Alan Bellows says, forgive me, but to judge anyone or their ideas based on their perceived type seems to be the polar opposite of open-mindedness. Don't you think it's better to stick with the facts and judge the theory independently of the man? He is asking important questions. Schrodinger says, I would ask if carbon dating applies to artworks. Then the medieval period did indeed exist. This dating serves as an excellent reference point. I would add that Alan Bellows is quite correct. Iliad does raise some important points. If he is correct, he certainly deserves our respect. But they're also saying that the carbon dating itself is based on some of these incorrect dates. So they're saying you can't trust the carbon dating either. Looks like there's an argument here between Alan Bellows and Schrodinger. Where's Alan here? Iliad and those who subscribe to his theory point out that carbon dating only indicates the approximate age of the item, not its calendar year. So if carbon dating indicates an item is about 2,000 years old, Iliad will say that it came from 295 BC rather than 5 AD. Crazy? Depends on who you ask. I don't completely discount the possibility that a few extra years have been slipped into the calendar at some point. I try to keep my mind open to possibilities. Marlon says, what a chilly reception. Don't get your fingers near all those mines snapping shut. A good test of this hypothesis is to carefully compare several civilizations' calendars for the period of the first millennium. And once agreement has been found, then compare that body of dates to our Western calendar. If all primitive civilizations, in other words, those who do not use the Christian calendar, if these civilizations have no events corresponding to that period, then it would be time to take another look at our beliefs about what happened during our Dark Ages, i.e. the Middle Ages, which is when those years are supposed to have disappeared, those nearly 300 years.